The warning lights painted Captain Dae-hyun's face red as the colony ship shuddered again. 3,000 people slept in the cryopods below, trusting him to deliver them safely to New Terra. Now he watched their lives slip away with each flicker of the dying power core. "How long?" he asked, already knowing the answer would be bad. Engineer Taman looked up from his console, sweat dripping down his forehead despite the cold. 6 hours. Maybe 7 if I push everything past safety limits. But Captain, we're in the middle of nowhere. Even if I send a distress call, nobody patrols the outer reaches. Dae-hyun gripped the armrest of his chair. The outer reaches were exactly what the name suggested. The empty space between civilized systems where pirates hunted and law meant nothing. They had chosen this route because it was faster and cheaper. Now that choice would kill everyone aboard. Dr. Hana entered the bridge, her medical coat wrinkled from another sleepless night. "The temperature is dropping in the cryo bay. If power goes below 40%, the pods will start failing. The children's pods will go first." The captain closed his eyes. During the isolation wars, Hana had watched hundreds die because ships like theirs couldn't get proper supplies. Earth had been alone then, cut off from the galaxy after a failed first contact. They were supposed to be past those dark days. "Send the distress call anyway," Dae-hyun ordered. "Use every frequency we have. Maybe someone will hear." Taman worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the controls. The message went out in 17 different languages, begging for help, offering everything they had in payment. It disappeared into the void like a whisper in a storm. They waited. 5 hours passed. The power dropped to 50%. Taman had tears in his eyes as he reported the numbers. Hana sat in the corner writing messages to families she would never send, telling parents their children had died in their sleep. Then the sensors blinked. Something was approaching. "Ship incoming," Taman said, his voice shaking. "It's not human. The design is Quilvan." Dae-hyun had heard of the Quilvan. They were traders, merchants who moved between systems selling exotic goods. They never got involved in conflicts. They never took sides. They were also rare. There weren't many of them left after some ancient disaster had reduced their numbers centuries ago. "Are they responding to our call?" Hana asked, hope creeping into her voice. "I don't know. They're just sitting there 3 kilometers away." The comm system crackled to life. The voice that came through was soft, almost musical, but speaking perfect human language. "Human vessel Horizons promise, this is the merchant ship Silent Current. We received your distress call. We see that you are dying." Dae-hyun grabbed the microphone. "This is Captain Dae-hyun. Yes, our power core is failing. We have 3,000 people in cryosleep. We can pay for help. We have credits, supplies, anything you need." Silence stretched for a long moment. Then the voice replied, "We are not interested in payment, Captain. We are interested in preservation. Prepare to receive emergency power cores and life support equipment." Taman's mouth fell open. "Captain, those power cores are worth a fortune. Why would they just give them to us?" Nobody had an answer. Over the next 3 hours, the Quilvan ship moved close to the Horizon's promise. Through the viewports, Dae-hyun could see their vessel, sleek and organic-looking, covered in patterns that seemed to shift in the starlight. Small transport pods ferried equipment across the gap between ships. Taemin worked like a man possessed, installing the new power cores with shaking hands. The equipment was strange, designed for different systems, but it worked. The lights grew brighter. The temperature began to rise. In the cryo bay, the failing pod stabilized. When it was done, Dae-hyun asked permission to come aboard the Quilvan ship. He needed to thank them properly, to understand why they had saved them. The interior of the Silent Current was beautiful. Everything curved and flowed like water frozen in time. Soft blue light came from the walls themselves. Captain Vellamora waited for him in a circular chamber, her reptilian features calm and wise. She was tall, covered in small scales that shimmered green and gold, with large eyes that seemed to look through him rather than at him. "You saved us," Dae-hyun said simply. 3,000 lives. I need to know what we owe you." Vellamora made a gesture with her long fingers that might have been a smile. "You owe us nothing, Captain Dae-hyun. My people believe in the sacred act of preservation. When we see life about to end, we act to save it. This creates balance in the universe. But those power cores, the supplies, you gave us a fortune. We gave you what you needed to live. Is there a price you would not pay for life itself?" Vellamora moved to a cabinet and removed a small object. It was a crystal, no bigger than a finger, that glowed with an inner light. This is a shard of witness. In our culture, we give these to mark moments of great significance. Take it and remember this day. Dae-hyun accepted the crystal, feeling its warmth in his palm. His throat felt tight with emotion. My people have a saying, we never forget those who help us. If your people ever need anything at all, you call us. I don't care if it's 50 years from now or 100. Humanity will come. Velmora's eyes grew sad. I hope that day never arrives, Captain. The universe can be cruel. I hope my people never face such need that we must call upon this debt. If you do, we'll be there. They spoke for another hour. Velmora told him about the Quilvan people, only 3 million of them left in the galaxy, scattered across a handful of worlds. They had survived by being peaceful, by trading, by never making enemies. They valued life above all else because they understood how fragile it was. When Dae-hyun returned to his ship, he held the shard of witness carefully. Taemin and Hana waited on the bridge. Are we ready to continue? The captain asked. Yes, sir, Taemin confirmed. The new cores will get us to New Terra with power to spare. As the silent current pulled away, heading back into the darkness of space, Dae-hyun made a decision. Hana, I want you to document everything that happened here.
Every detail.
Taemin, I want you to make copies and send them to Earth. This story needs to be told. Everyone needs to know what the Quilvan did for us. What are you going to do with that crystal? Hana asked. Dae-hyun looked at the shard of witness, watching the light pulse within it like a heartbeat. I'm going to make sure humanity never forgets. This isn't just a gift. It's a promise, and humans keep their promises. The Horizon's promise sailed on toward New Terra, carrying its sleeping passengers and one very awake crew. Behind them, the Quilvan ship disappeared into the stars. Neither species knew it yet, but that meeting would change the galaxy forever. 50 years had passed since the Horizon's promise limped into New Terra orbit with borrowed power cores. Captain Dae-hyun was an old man now, spending his days in a wheelchair overlooking the colony he had helped build. But he still told the story to anyone who would listen. His granddaughter Ji-woo listened more than most. She had heard the tale 100 times, but it never got old. Now she sat in the office of Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, and that story was the reason she had this job. Another trade agreement with the Quilvan, her assistant said, placing the documents on her desk. They're offering to share their water purification technology. Ji-woo smiled. The Quilvan never forgot the humans either. Over the decades, they had become trusted friends. She had visited their homeworld Quilvara 3 times, walking through their floating cities and swimming in their crystal-clear oceans. The planet was breathtaking, a world of water and islands where the Quilvan built their civilization in harmony with nature. But friendship wasn't why Ji-woo thought about them every day. It was the debt. The unpaid debt that haunted humanity's collective memory. She walked through the memorial park on her way home. In the center stood a monument made of dark stone, and inside a protective case sat the original shard of witness. Every human child visited this place on school trips. Every human knew the story by heart. The Quilvan had saved 3,000 lives when they had nothing to gain. Humanity had not forgotten. We will repay them, Ji-woo whispered to the crystal as she had done countless times before. I promise. The next morning changed everything. Ji-woo was reviewing reports when her comm system started screaming. Not a normal alert, an emergency override that only activated for the worst situations. She hit the button and Archivist Bora's face appeared, pale and frightened. Ambassador, we received a distress signal. It's encoded in old Quilvan protocols. Ji-woo's heart stopped. Show me. The signal was broken, fragmentary, as if it had traveled through interference. But the words that came through were clear enough. Quilvara under attack. Requesting assistance. All Quilvan vessels respond. How old is this signal? Ji-woo demanded. 3 hours. It came through the relay stations. Ambassador, the Galactic Council has already been notified. There's an emergency session starting in 20 minutes. Ji-woo ran. She didn't walk with dignity like an ambassador should. She ran through the halls of the diplomatic complex, her shoes echoing on marble floors. By the time she reached the council chamber, she was breathing hard, and her carefully styled hair had come loose. The chamber held representatives from 40 different species. At the center floated a hologram of the galaxy, with Quilvara highlighted in red. Admiral Hyun-woo stood near the military display, his face grim. The council speaker, a tall insectoid being called Thex, raised his staff. The matter before us is clear. The Quilvan homeworld has been blockaded by the Krathon Dominion. The Krethan are demanding surrender and access to Quilvara's rare mineral deposits. The Quilvan have no military and cannot defend themselves. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Krathon Dominion was feared across the galaxy. They were conquerors who believed that might made right. Their empire had swallowed a dozen worlds in the last 10 years. We must vote on whether to intervene, Thex continued. The risks are substantial. The Krathon have made it clear they will consider any interference an act of war. Admiral Hyunwoo stepped forward. How many ships do they have at Quilvara? Our intelligence suggests over 200 warships. The admiral's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Jiwoo knew what he was thinking. The entire Terran defense fleet numbered maybe 80 combat-ready ships. The odds were impossible. The vote began. Species after species voted no. They offered sympathy, suggested sanctions, proposed diplomatic solutions, but none would commit their forces. The Krathon were too strong. The risk was too great. When it came to humanity's turn, Jiwoo stood. Her voice was quiet, but every being in the chamber heard her clearly. 50 years ago, my grandfather's ship was dying in deep space. 3,000 people, mostly families and children, were hours from death. A Quilvan merchant vessel diverted from its route to save them. They gave us power cores worth a fortune and asked for nothing in return. They told us they believed in the sacred act of preservation. She paused, looking around the chamber. Every human child learns this story. Every human knows what we owe. The Quilvan saved us when we were helpless. Today they are helpless. Today they need us. Thex interrupted. Ambassador, the Krathon Dominion is not... I don't care how strong the Krathon are, Jiwoo said, her voice rising. I don't care about the odds. I don't care about the risk. 50 years ago, the Quilvan didn't calculate odds. They didn't consider risk. They saw people dying and they acted. Now we will act. You're talking about war, someone said from the back of the chamber. I'm talking about honor. Jiwoo turned to face them all. Humanity votes yes. We will go to Quilvara. We will defend our friends.
Anyone who wants to join us is welcome.
Anyone who tries to stop us will be remembered. The chamber erupted in argument. Some species called her insane. Others suggested humanity had a death wish. But Jiwoo noticed a few, a very few, who looked at her with something like respect. She left the chamber and went directly to Earth's military command center. Admiral Hyunwoo was already there, studying fleet deployments. Tell me honestly, Jiwoo said. Can we win? Hyunwoo looked at her with tired eyes. Against 200 Krathon warships? No, we'll be lucky to hold them off for a day. Maybe 2 if we're clever and willing to sacrifice everything. Then we sacrifice everything. Jiwoo, I'm talking about thousands of casualties. Maybe the entire fleet. If we lose, Earth will be defenseless. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, her grandfather sat in his wheelchair, probably telling the story again to his nurses. Admiral, my grandfather made a promise. Every human made that promise. We said we would come if the Quilvan needed us. They need us now. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll need 3 days to mobilize the fleet. You have 2. Within hours, the word spread across human space. Earth was going to war with the Krathon Dominion to defend the Quilvan. The response was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Private vessels offered their services. Colony World sent supplies and asked to send ships. On New Terra, the original survivors of the Horizon's Promise held a press conference. They were old now, gray-haired and slow, but their voices were strong. Taemin, the engineer, spoke for them all. We were there. We saw what the Quilvan did for us. They saved us because it was right, not because it was profitable. Now humanity will do the same. This is who we are. This is what makes us human. 2 days later, the Terran defense fleet assembled in orbit above Earth. 12 carriers, 40 cruisers, and hundreds of support vessels. It was the largest military deployment in human history. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who knew they might not come home. On the flagship Eternal Gratitude, Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge with the shard of witness in his pocket. Jiwoo had given it to him personally, removed from its protective case for the first time in 50 years. All ships report ready, his second-in-command said. Hyunwoo looked at the view screen, at the assembled might of humanity. Not enough to win, but enough to try. Enough to honor a debt. Set course for Quilvara, he ordered. Maximum speed. And broadcast this message to the fleet. Remember what we fight for. Remember who saved us when we needed saving. Today we repay that debt. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. They had 6 days of travel ahead of them. 6 days to prepare. 6 days to say goodbye to the people they loved. On Quilvara, the Quilvan watched the Crethon warships multiply in their skies. They prayed to their ancient spirits and waited for the end. They didn't know yet that help was coming. They didn't know that somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity was racing toward them at speeds that made their engines scream. But they would know soon. The whole galaxy would know soon. Humanity never forgot a favor. And the payback was about to shake the stars themselves. The Crethon blockade around Quilvara looked like a wall of death. Over 200 warships, each bristling with weapons, formed layers of defense around the peaceful water world. On the surface, the Quilvan watched helplessly as their orbital stations burned. They had no weapons, no army, no way to fight back. In the floating city of Kelvana, old Velmora stood at the highest observation tower. She had been the merchant captain who saved the humans 50 years ago. Now she was the spiritual leader of her people, and she watched them die with tears running down her scaled face. "Elder, we should evacuate you to the deep shelters," her aide said quietly. Velmora shook her head. "No, I will watch. I will witness. That is what our people do. We witness, and we remember." A young Quilvan ran into the chamber, breathing hard. "Elder, the Crethon are broadcasting again. They say if we don't surrender in the next hour, they'll start destroying our cities." "We have nothing to surrender with," Velmora said sadly. "We are not a military people. We never have been." Below, in the streets of the floating city, Quilvan families held each other. Parents tried to explain to their children why the sky was full of angry ships. Teachers led students in traditional songs, trying to bring peace in their final hours. The Quilvan had survived for thousands of years by being peaceful, by avoiding conflict, by helping others. Now that philosophy was about to end them. On the Crethon flagship Iron Fang, Overlord Krex studied the planet below with satisfaction. The Quilvan were weak. They had valuable minerals but no way to protect them. This would be an easy conquest. In a few hours, Quilvara would belong to the Dominion, and his reputation would grow even stronger. "Overlord, we're detecting a hyperspace exit signature," one of his officers reported. "Multiple contacts." Krex waved a claw dismissively. "Probably more fleeing merchant vessels. Let them run. We want the planet, not scattered ships." "Sir, the signatures are getting stronger. This isn't a few merchants, this is a fleet." Now Krex paid attention. He pulled up the sensor display and his mandibles clicked in confusion. The energy signatures were massive. Dozens of capital ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. "Who dares interfere?" he demanded. The answer came a moment later. "Sir, they're broadcasting identification codes. The fleet is human. Terran Defense Fleet." Krex had heard of humans. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely a century since first contact. They were supposed to be weak, disorganized, emotional creatures. What were they doing here? The human fleet took position between the Crethon blockade and Quilvara. Krex counted the ships with growing amusement. Maybe 80 combat vessels against his 200. The humans had come to die. "This is Overlord Krex of the Crethon Dominion." He broadcast on all frequencies. "You are interfering with legitimate military operations. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The response came from the flagship Eternal Gratitude. The human who appeared on the screen wore an admiral's uniform and had steel in his eyes. "This is Admiral Hyun-woo of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received a distress call from the Quilvan people. We are here to answer it. You have one chance to withdraw peacefully." Krex laughed, a harsh chittering sound. "You dare threaten us? We outnumber you more than 2 to 1. Your species is barely a century old in space. What makes you think you can stand against the Dominion?" 50 years ago, the Quilvan saved 3,000 human lives when they had nothing to gain from it. They gave us power cores worth a fortune and asked for nothing in return. Today we repay that debt. Hyunwoo's voice was calm but absolute. "Withdraw from Quilvara, or learn why humans never forget. You're insane. Your people will be wiped out for those who cannot even fight for themselves. We die for those who saved us when we couldn't fight for ourselves. There's a difference you'll never understand. Krex ended the transmission and turned to his fleet commanders. Destroy them. Leave no survivors. I want the galaxy to see what happens to fools who oppose the Dominion. The Krathon fleet began to move, repositioning for attack. Their weapon systems came online, painting the human ships with targeting data. In the cities below, the Quilvan stopped singing and watched the sky with renewed hope and terrible fear. On the Eternal Gratitude, Admiral Hyunwoo stood calmly on the bridge. Around him, officers worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the shard of witness, letting it rest in his palm. All ships, this is Admiral Hyunwoo. Today we honor a 50-year-old promise. Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. You all volunteered for this mission. You all knew the odds. I'm proud to serve with every one of you. His second-in-command, Captain Dongjun, stepped beside him. Orders, sir? We hold the line. Whatever it takes, we hold the line. Not one Krathon ship reaches the planet. In the fighter bay of the carrier Indomitable, pilot Jinna checked her flight systems one last time. Her parents had been on the horizons, Promise's children, sleeping in cryopods when the Quilvan saved them. She had grown up hearing the story. Now she would write the next chapter. All fighters, this is Vanguard Leader. She broadcast to her squadron. Stay tight. Watch your wing. Remember your training. And remember why we're here. Her wingman, Quan, replied with a steadiness that belied his youth. We remember. We'll always remember. The Krathon opened fire first. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. The Terran ships activated their shields and began evasive maneuvers. The battle had begun. Jinna launched. With her squadron, 30 small fighters racing toward a wall of capital ships. The odds were insane. But as she flew, she thought about 3,000 people sleeping in the dark, trusting strangers to save them. The Quilvan had faced impossible odds, too. They had chosen to act anyway. Vanguard, target the weapons arrays on that cruiser. Hit them fast and pull out. The fighters dove through a hail of defensive fire. Jinna felt her ship shudder as a near miss rattled her shields. Beside her, one of the new pilots took a direct hit and disappeared in a flash of light. She gritted her teeth and kept flying. They reached the Krathon cruiser and released their missiles. Explosions rippled across the ship's hull. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to take out some weapons. Small victories. That's all they could hope for right now. On the surface of Quilvara, Velmora watched the light show in orbit. Each flash was a ship dying. Each streak of energy was someone fighting. And they were fighting for her people. For Quilvan they had never met. Because of a promise made half a century ago. Elder. Her aide whispered. They came. The humans actually came. I never doubted they would, Velmora said, though her voice shook. I just hoped they would never have to. The battle intensified. Human carriers launched wave after wave of fighters. Cruisers formed protective formations around the planet, taking hits meant for each other. Medical ships worked frantically to retrieve wounded crew. Every human in the fleet knew they were probably going to die. None of them considered retreating. Dr. So-hyun commanded the hospital ship Mercy's Hand. Her bay was already filling with wounded. Burns, radiation poisoning, decompression injuries. She worked with steady hands and tears streaming down her face, saving everyone she could while knowing hundreds more were dying in space. Doctor, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, a nurse said. The Quilvan want to send medical supplies up to help us. So-hyun almost laughed. They were fighting to save the Quilvan, and the Quilvan were trying to help them in return. That was the kind of people they were. On the Krathon flagship, Overlord, Krex was beginning to feel something he rarely experienced. Concern. Yes, his fleet outnumbered the humans. Yes, they had superior firepower. But the humans fought like demons. They used tactics he had never seen. Suicide runs, coordinated strikes, sacrificial maneuvers where one ship would ram a Krathon vessel to save 3 others. Casualties, he demanded. 20 ships destroyed, 37 damaged. The humans have lost 12 ships, but they're fighting harder. not weaker. Krex studied the tactical display. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly. To reach the planet, his fleet would have to go through them. And the humans were making that incredibly expensive. Worse, he was getting reports from other regions. Other species were watching this battle. The Galactic Council was in emergency session. Some species were calling humanity's defense of Quilvara heroic. Others were questioning why the Dominion needed to bully a peaceful people. For the first time, Krex wondered if he had made a mistake. Not because he might lose the battle, he wouldn't, but because the cost of winning might be too high. In the void between fleets, fighter pilot Jinna led another strike. Her squadron was down to 18 fighters now, but they kept going. Behind them, the planet of Quilvara gleamed blue and beautiful, untouched by the battle above. This is for everyone they saved, Jinna whispered to herself. This is for keeping our promises. She armed her missiles and flew back into the fire. The battle raged on. Day 2 of the Battle of Quilvara began with fire in the sky. The human fleet had held through the first night, but the cost showed on every ship. Hulls were scarred with weapon impacts. Shield generators ran at dangerous levels. Medical bays overflowed with wounded. Still, not one human vessel had retreated. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Eternal Gratitude, his uniform torn and dirty. He had not slept in 36 hours. Around him, the crew worked with mechanical precision, running on determination alone. The tactical display showed the situation clearly. They had lost 24 ships. The Krethon had lost 40. Admiral, engineering reports were down to 60% power. Captain Dongjun said quietly, "If we push the reactors any harder, we risk a core breach." "Push them harder," Hyunwoo replied. "We don't need to win. We just need to hold until the Krethon realize the cost isn't worth it." Overlord Krex had made the same calculation. 40 ships destroyed, 60 damaged enough to need extensive repair, all for one small planet. The Krethon Dominion was powerful, but this battle was becoming expensive. And still the humans refused to break. "They're insane," his tactical officer said, watching another human cruiser ram a Krethon battleship rather than let it break through to the planet. Both ships exploded in a ball of plasma. "They fight like they have nothing to lose. They fight like they have everything to prove," Krex corrected. His mandibles clicked in frustration. "I've never seen anything like this. Most species surrender when they realize they're outmatched. These humans just fight harder." In the fighter bay of the Indomitable, Jinna prepared for her 8th mission of the day. Her fighter was held together by emergency repairs and luck. Half her squadron was gone, but when the call came for another strike, everyone who could still fly climbed into their cockpits. "Vanguard leader, this is command. We need you to hit the flagship. The Iron Fang is coordinating their entire fleet. If we can damage their command systems, it might buy us time." Jinna looked at the tactical display. The Iron Fang sat in the center of the Krethon formation, protected by layers of defensive ships. Getting close enough to attack it would be suicide. Getting back out would be impossible. "Understood, command. Vanguard is going in." She switched to her squadron channel. "You all heard it. This is a one-way trip. Nobody has to come with me. No shame in sitting this one out." Every remaining pilot in her squadron responded immediately. "We're with you, leader." Quan, her wingman, added, "My grandmother was on the Horizon's promise. I'm not letting her down now." Jinna felt her throat tighten. "All right. Let's show them what humans do for their friends." The 12 remaining fighters of Vanguard Squadron launched into a battle that had become a storm of fire and death. They flew in tight formation, using every trick they knew to avoid the defensive fire. 2 fighters exploded in the first 30 seconds. Jinna kept flying. On the surface of Quilvara, Elder Velmora had not left the observation tower in 2 days. She watched every moment of the battle, bearing witness as her people's tradition demanded. Around her, the entire city had fallen silent. Everyone watched the sky. "Elder, the humans are trying to reach the Krethon flagship," her aide reported. "They're sacrificing themselves to protect us." Velmora's tears had long since dried. Now she felt a grief so deep it went beyond tears. "Record everything. Every ship. Every name if we can learn them. Our people must remember this forever." Vanguard Squadron punched through the Krethon lines with only 6 fighters remaining. Jinna armed her missiles and targeted the flagship's command tower. The Iron Fang loomed before her, massive and deadly. "For everyone they saved," she whispered, and fired. Her missiles streaked toward the target. Defensive fire turned 3 of her squadron mates into debris, but the missiles hit home, exploding across the flagship's communications array. The Iron Fang lurched as its command systems flickered. Jinnah tried to bank away, but her fighter took a direct hit. Systems failed across her board. She was going down. Oddly, she felt calm. Her parents had almost died in the darkness of space. The Quilven had saved them. Now she had helped save the Quilven. It was a fair trade. This is Vanguard leader to any ship. I'm going down, but the mission is complete. Tell my parents I remembered. Tell them I kept the promise. Her fighter tumbled toward Quilvara's atmosphere. The last thing Jinnah saw was the blue ocean below, beautiful and peaceful. Then rescue ships appeared out of nowhere. Small Quilven vessels, civilian craft that had no business being in a battle zone, raced toward her dying fighter. They caught her with tractor beams and pulled her toward the planet's surface. Human pilot, this is Quilven Rescue. We have you. You saved us. Now we save you. Jinnah felt tears of surprise and joy as her fighter was guided to safety. The Quilven were risking their lives to rescue her, just as she had risked hers for them. The circle was complete. On the eternal gratitude, Admiral Hyunwoo received a transmission that made him stop in disbelief. Sir, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Ships are arriving. Krethon reinforcements? No, sir, they're transmitting friendly codes. Species identification shows Torvian, Hellion, and Makesh vessels. They're taking position alongside our fleet. Hyunwoo stared at the tactical display as 12 alien warships joined the battle. They were not human allies. They were species from the Galactic Council who had voted against intervention. But now they were here. The Torvian commander's face appeared on screen, a leonine being with golden fur. Admiral Hyunwoo, this is Commander Roktar of the Torvian Starguard. We watched your species sacrifice everything for an old debt. Honor demands we stand with you. More ships appeared, a Helion cruiser wing, 3 Makesh destroyers, species after species arriving in small groups drawn by something they had witnessed. The humans had declared they would die for their promise. That declaration had moved the galaxy. Overlord Krex watched the enemy forces swell and felt his certainty crack. This was no longer a simple conquest. This was becoming a statement. If he pressed the attack now, he would be fighting half the Galactic Council. The political cost would be enormous. Overlord, our casualties are approaching 50%. We've lost 70 ships. The humans have lost 32, but now they have reinforcements. Krex made his decision. Withdraw. We disengage. Sir, we outnumber them. We can still... I said withdraw. Krex's voice was harsh. This planet isn't worth fighting the entire galaxy. The humans wanted to make a point. They've made it. The Krethon fleet began to pull back, leaving the orbital space around Quilvara. As they retreated, Overlord Krex sent one final transmission to the human admiral. Your species is insane, Admiral Hyunwoo. You sacrificed everything for people who could not fight beside you. We will remember this battle. We will remember that humans do not calculate odds. They do not weigh profit. They simply keep their promises, no matter the cost. Hyunwoo's response was quiet. Then you've learned the most important thing about humanity. We never forget a favor, and we never break a promise. Tell that to anyone who threatens our friends. The Krethon fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the battered human fleet in orbit around Quilvara. Around them, the Allied ships that had come to help held position, a silent honor guard. On the surface, Elder Velmora collapsed to her knees and finally allowed herself to feel hope. The humans had kept their promise. They had come across the stars, faced impossible odds, and held the line. 32 ships destroyed, thousands of humans dead, all to repay a debt from 50 years ago. Prepare a message, she told her aide, her voice shaking. Send it to every human ship. Tell them we will never forget. Tell them the Quilven people are forever in their debt. Tell them we will spend the rest of our existence honoring their sacrifice. In the medical bay of the Mercy's Hand, Dr. So-hyun worked through her exhaustion to save one more life. She had lost count of how many operations she had performed, but every person she saved was another reason the sacrifice had meaning. A young ensign on her table opened his eyes weakly. Doctor, did we hold? Did we save them? So-hyun smiled through her tears. We held. The Quilven are safe. The Krethon are gone. You did it. You all did it. The ensign smiled and closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to rest. Admiral Hyunwoo stood at the viewport, looking down at the beautiful blue world they had defended. In his hand, the shard of witness glowed with an inner light. He thought about Captain Dae-hyun, an old man who had made a promise in the darkness of space. He thought about the 3,000 people sleeping in cryopods, saved by strangers who asked for nothing. "We kept your promise, Captain," Hyun-woo whispered. "We came when they needed us, just like you said we would." Around Quilvara, the human fleet held position, battle-scarred but unbroken. They had lost 32 ships and thousands of crew, but they had proven something to the galaxy. When humans make a promise, they keep it, even if it costs them everything. 5 years after the Battle of Quilvara, Ambassador Jiwoo stood before the largest gathering in Galactic Council history. Representatives from 83 species filled the chamber, more than had ever assembled before. They were here to witness something unprecedented. The Alliance of Honor, Jiwoo announced, is now formally recognized by the Galactic Council. 12 founding species, united not by strategic calculation or economic benefit but by shared principles. We defend each other because it is right. We honor our debts. We keep our promises. The chamber erupted in approval. Not all species joined the alliance, but all respected it. The Battle of Quilvara had changed the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. Before that battle, most species believed power came from military might or economic leverage. The humans had proven that power also came from loyalty, from keeping your word even when it cost you everything. Jiwoo stepped down from the podium and walked through the memorial garden outside the council building. This garden had been built by the Kilvan, a gift to humanity. Flowers from Quilvara bloomed alongside earth roses. Water flowed in patterns that honored both species. And in the center stood a monument of black stone. 3,000 names were inscribed on that stone. Not the names of those who died in the battle, though there was another monument for them. These were the names of the people saved by the Horizon's promise 50 years ago. The people whose rescue had started everything. At the bottom of the monument, a simple phrase in both human and Quilvan languages: "One act of kindness. 2 species forever changed." A galaxy transformed. Jiwoo touched the stone gently. Her grandfather Dae-hyun had passed away 2 years ago, just months after seeing the Krethon withdraw from Quilvara. He had died knowing the promise was kept. His last words to her had been simple: "We remembered. That's what matters." On New Terra, the colony world that almost died, a new generation was growing up. Every child knew the story. Every school had a lesson about the Quilvan rescue and humanity's response. The phrase, "We remember, we return, we repay," had become humanity's unofficial motto. Young Minna sat in her classroom, listening to a Quilvan teacher describe the Battle of Quilvara. The Quilvan Education Exchange Program was wildly popular. Quilvan taught human children about their culture, while human teachers went to Quilvara to share human history. The 2 species had become inseparably linked. "Why did the humans come to save us?" a student asked. "You said they knew they might all die." The Quilvan teacher, a young woman named Sora, smiled sadly. "Because 50 years before, my great-grandmother saved them. My great-grandmother was Captain Velmora. She believed in the sacred act of preservation. She taught the humans that lesson. They taught the galaxy. But so many humans died," another student said. "Yes, 3,147 humans died defending Quilvara. My people will remember every single name for the rest of our existence. We have built a floating library in their honor. It is the largest library on our world, and it is dedicated to preserving the story of what humans did for us." On Earth, Admiral Hyun-woo had retired from active service. He spent his days at the military academy, teaching the next generation of officers. Today's lesson was about the Battle of Quilvara. "The Krethon outnumbered us more than 2 to 1, he told the young cadets. "We lost 32 ships in 3 days. By every strategic calculation, we should have retreated. By every tactical assessment, we should have negotiated. But we didn't consider strategy or tactics. We considered honor." A cadet raised her hand. "Sir, some historians say the Battle of Quilvara was foolish, that we risked too much for too little gain." Hyun-woo smiled. "Those historians don't understand. We didn't fight for gain. We fought to keep a promise. And that battle did more to establish humanity's reputation than 100 diplomatic treaties could have."
Today, when human traders go to new worlds, they're welcomed.
When human colonies need help, a dozen species respond. Why? Because everyone knows that if you help a human, they will never forget. That reputation is worth more than any fleet. He pulled out a small crystal that glowed with inner light, a replica of the original Shard of Witness. Every human ship now carried one. They had become a symbol. This represents what makes us human, Hyunwoo continued. Not our technology, not our military power. Our memory, our loyalty, our refusal to forget those who helped us when we needed it most. On Quilvara, the dedication ceremony for the Library of Remembrance was beginning. Elder Kale, who had succeeded Velmora as spiritual leader, stood before a massive structure that floated on the ocean. The library's walls were made of crystal that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Ambassador Jiwoo was there, along with a delegation of human survivors from the battle. Among them was Jinnah, the pilot who had been shot down during the attack on the Crethon flagship. The Quilvan had rescued her, repaying humanity's rescue with one of their own. Now she walked with a slight limp, but her spirit was unbroken. This library, Elder Kale announced, contains the story of every human who died defending our world, their service records, their family histories, their hopes and dreams. We have spent 5 years gathering this information. Future generations of Quilvan will study here and learn what sacrifice means. They will understand that some debts can never be fully repaid, but must be honored forever. He gestured to the entrance. Above the door, carved in both Quilvan and human languages, were words that made Jiwoo's throat tighten. They came when we called. They held when we faltered. They remembered when others forgot. This is humanity. Jinnah stepped forward, representing all the human veterans. Elder Kale, we didn't fight for glory or gratitude. We fought because the Quilvan saved us first. You showed us what it meant to act without expectation of reward. We simply followed your example. And in doing so, Kale replied, you taught the galaxy that kindness is never wasted. One merchant captain saved 3,000 humans. Those humans grew up knowing that debt. When we needed help, an entire species answered. Now other species have learned the same lesson. The Alliance of Honor exists because of what happened here. The ceremony continued, but Jiwoo slipped away to walk along the floating pathways. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, crystal clear and peaceful. It was hard to imagine this world had been under attack just 5 years ago. A young Quilvan approached her shyly. Ambassador Jiwoo, I wanted to thank you. My family was in the coastal cities when the Crethon attacked. Without the humans, we would have died. You don't need to thank me, Jiwoo said gently. Your people saved us first, but you could have forgotten. 50 years is a long time. Most species would have moved on. Jiwoo knelt down to the child's level. Let me tell you something. Every human child learns about the Quilvan rescue before they learn to read. We built monuments. We told stories. We made absolutely certain that no human would ever forget what your people did for us. Because that's who we are. We remember. The child smiled and ran off. Jiwoo stood and continued her walk, thinking about how much had changed. The Crethon Dominion had stopped expanding after Quilvara. Other aggressive empires thought twice before attacking peaceful worlds. The Alliance of Honor had 12 members now, and more were joining each year. It all started because a Quilvan merchant captain named Velmora had seen a dying ship and decided to help. No profit motive, no strategic advantage, just the belief that preserving life was sacred. That one decision had saved 3,000 people. Those people had told their children. Their children had joined the military, become ambassadors, taught in schools, built monuments. When the time came, an entire species had mobilized to repay the debt. And that mobilization had inspired other species to believe in honor again. One act of kindness. Ripples that spread across the galaxy. Back on Earth, in the memorial park where the original Shard of Witness still stood, Captain Daehyun's great-grandson played with his friends. He was only 6 years old, but he already knew the story. His teacher had told it to him last week. Why did the Quilvan save us? He asked his mother that evening. Because they believed it was the right thing to do, she replied. And we saved them back? Yes, because we never forget when someone helps us. The boy thought about this seriously. When I grow up, I want to help people too. So they'll remember. His mother smiled and hugged him. That's the point, sweetheart. We help people because it's right. Not because we want them to remember. But if they do remember, if they honor that help, then kindness spreads, it grows. It changes worlds. Across human space, similar conversations happened every day. The Battle of Quilvara had become more than history. It had become a teaching tool, a moral compass, a reminder of what humanity could be at its best. In the Galactic Council chamber, new species now asked to meet with humans first. Not because humans had the strongest military or the biggest economy, but because humans had proven they could be trusted. They kept their promises. They honored their debts. They remembered. Ambassador Jiwoo returned to her office on Earth and found a message waiting from Elder Kale. She opened it, curious. Ambassador, I wanted you to know that 3 new species have approached the Quilvan about joining the Alliance of Honor. They cited humanity's defense of our world as their inspiration,